folks, how are you all doing? Laura here. I'm going to go through a Leaving Cert history essay with you today from The Pursuit of Sovereignty and the Impact of Partition topic. It was on the 2009 paper and it's about Ireland's cultural identity, the promotion of it north and south. Now you can see on the screen in front of you folks that I'm going to go through different aspects of picking the question, the Chief Examiner's report, etc, etc. I think it would be a really good idea before we made a start if you had a read of the full essay. It would just put it all into your head and make it a bit clearer for you as I talk about the essay, and it would be easier for you to follow. So let's get into it. Let's look at the question itself. You have to make your choice on your Leaving Cert exam day really quickly. You have to be happy with it. You have to make sure that you're ticking all of the right boxes for the examiner. So what are some of those boxes? So first of all, what stands out to me always are the dates. So I need to make sure that I cover the entirety of the dates that are mentioned. More simply, I mean I have to start at 1912 and finish at 1945 at least. I'm going to give a bit of context and set the scene of things that were going on before 1912 and hopefully place everything in the wider context of after 1945. But for the most part, the main chunk of my essay needs to go all the way up to 1945 from 1912. Really important. I need to notice that there's a little word in there, but it's a big one, A-N-D, north and south. Make sure you talk about both. You would be amazed at how sometimes people in the stress of the exam hall don't see that word and, or sometimes they see it and they magically see and or, and they just talk about the one. Take a breath, read the question, make sure it's clear to you. You're being asked to talk about what attempts were made to promote cultural identity. You're not just listing what was the cultural identity? What did governments and groups and individuals do to promote that, to push it, to illustrate it, to highlight it, to increase it? Use those phrases, answer those questions in your mind. And if you do that, you put it down on the page, you are referring to the question that's being asked of you on the day. And the examiner is going to love that and going to give you marks for it. Now, when the examiners go through all of their essays and everything, all the results are done, the overall chief examiner will summarise what has happened that year. One of the chief examiner's reports talks about a number of things. They said they should not become the exclusive basis for the answering of questions. That was in relation to case studies. Okay, so be really careful that if there's a case study, whether it might be the Eucharistic Congress or something like that, make sure that you don't use that and simply summarise it for your essay. This is what some people are doing. They're looking out for the essays that do incorporate specifically a case study and they're just talking about the case study. Be careful that you don't do that. The other thing is that you need to make sure that while there is a narrative element, the analytical demands of the question are really important, and that candidates, that's you need to be prepared to engage in historical argument so that they're not just listing the facts that they know, they are scrutinising them, they're making an argument, they're giving an opinion, they're engaging in historical debate, historical argument. This is everything that I know, and because of what I know, this is my opinion, or this is the argument that I'm making in relation to cultural identity or in relation to whatever is being asked of me on the day. That is what the chief examiner wants you to be aware of. Keep that in your mind as you're looking through your essays, reviewing them, and indeed as you're looking at sample answers like you are today. Now, this essay does tick a lot of those boxes. The introduction, you can see there straight away, even before you read a word, you can see that it's meaty. You can see a lot of facts standing out to you there, and it sets the scene really well. It places all of this in the context of the separation of the two states, and that's why there was a north and a south, and how there was in some ways a linked cultural identity and in some ways a completely diverse cultural identity. Really important to note that. I'm often asked, how do I start my essay, miss? What's my first sentence? Well, your first sentence is often the simplest of answers to the question. Ask yourself, what is the answer to the question in, one sentence? What if it was only worth 2 marks? What's that answer? And this essay does that quite nicely. It opens with, due to the way the two states were established, both the north and the south of Ireland strive to set up a cultural identity which was inevitably linked to the ruling political party. That's the overall answer. That was the problem. Both governments were promoting the culture in different ways. It uses great language and expression, and it maps out the approach that this person is taking for this essay. I'm going to go through this and this and the GAA and the Gaelic League and the Protestant and the Anglo-Irish revival of literature and things like that. I'm going to talk about the Orange Order. This helps me, the examiner, see these are all the things that he or she said they're going to talk about. I have to make sure that they do talk about it. And it also helps you, as the writer, to have something to refer back to. So make sure that you do everything that you said you were going to do in your intro, basically, and don't be afraid to refer back to your intro. Moving on now to the main body of the essay. Firstly, I want to zoom in on paragraphs 1 and 2 and look at what's good about them and indeed what could be improved and improved quite easily about them. I've highlighted the words promoted and identity. Why have I highlighted them? Where have you seen them before? Well, they're part of the set question. So straight away, this person is starting off using the words of the set question to help guide their argument, help guide their sentences. Great idea. Then they give, you see there, lots of really specific, relevant evidence to back up their argument. They know their stuff. At the end of this paragraph, it finishes off with both Cumann na Gael and Fianna Fáil, through their policies, implied that being Irish was inevitably linked with speaking Irish. They are aware of the question and the argument that they're making. So this paragraph was about the Irish language and the link between the Irish language and the cultural identity of the South. Then they give specific facts about the promotion of Irish language. Then they are analysing what all of those facts said or did. They showed that speaking Irish was linked to being Irish. That was part of your cultural identity. Okay? They're not just giving the narrative, they are showing their analytical skills as well. Now remember, guys, your Leaving Cert history essays are not separate chunks of information that have nothing linking them. Of course they do. Your paragraphs need to be linked, and these paragraphs could be easily linked, and they're not here. So the opening sentence of the second paragraph could easily say something like, W.T. Cosgrave was another promoter of cultural identity, something like that. You know, that word another is a simple linking phrase that could be used there. Find your own way, find your own language, but don't forget your linking phrases and to vary them. So he talks about how, Catholicism is linked to the cultural identity of the South. And then they give a great list of examples of the things that the Catholic Church kind of liked or implemented, that the government implemented in order to promote this Catholic identity. While the listing is good and while the facts are accurate, it's not really specifically pointing out what is being promoted here. Like, what's being promoted here, in my opinion, is that part of the cultural identity was a very clean living, moral identity. That didn't look at racy films or didn't drink a lot. It's just not being stated explicitly enough what exactly is being promoted in relation to the cultural identity here. Don't be afraid to say it in a really simple way. Through all of these things, Cosgrave was promoting the Irish cultural identity as a moral, clean living one. Something like that. Moving down the essay to paragraphs 6 and 7 and talking more specifically now about the cultural identity of the North. Don't forget your linking phrases, okay? They are used every now and then in the essay, but not really enough. So watch out for them. The language of the set question has not been forgotten about. Okay, we're moving on to James Craig, who promoted the cultural identity as being Protestant and British. And now I'm going to set about proving that. And I'm going to give lots of really impressive knowledge on the cultural identity as it was promoted in the North. The flag and the Orange Order and the Ulster Protestant League, all of those things are excellent examples of how the cultural identity was being promoted. Really, really excellent examples. But again, it's not really being linked back to the question in a really clear and explicit way. The first paragraph in front of you there ends with James Craig declared to Stormont, I'm an Orangeman first and a politician and member of Parliament second. The second paragraph ends with how Northern Catholics were attacked after attending the Eucharistic Congress. So both of those paragraphs need to talk about, just like I said before, how the cultural identity in the North was being highlighted as one that was extremely Protestant and anti-Catholic. You need to just link it back to what exactly was being promoted. Just, say it. Say the simple sentence. The conclusion of this essay does finish quite strong. You want to sum up the arguments that you've made. You need to place it all in the wider context. You need to use the words of the question. This conclusion does a lot of that. It does give a good overall scrutiny and analysis. The first sentence there is Unionists and Nationalists shared many similar beliefs on moral and other matters, but rarely came together to celebrate this. That's a very impressive sentence in relation to how this person has taken a step back from everything they've said in the previous 7 or 8 paragraphs, and how they've come to the opinion that isn't it weird that both sides were so similar, but they didn't celebrate that. You know, that's a good opinion and scrutiny of what they have previously said. They have mentioned the wider context. They've talked about 1949, which is outside of the dates mentioned, so they are aware of that. But I would like to see a more detailed summary of the topics mentioned in that scrutiny and analysis, you know. So it says that the Unionists and Nationalists shared many similar beliefs. Give me an example of that as you had mentioned it in the essay. You know, that would just add a bit more oomph to this particular conclusion. It's a very, very good conclusion, and it just needs a little bit more polish to move it up into that excellent category. So guys, that brings me to the end of my essay breakdown today. I hope you found it helpful. Now remember, the full essay is analysed for you on Studyclix if you'd like a bit of detail and analysis of the paragraphs that I didn't specifically mention today. And I hope to talk to you all again. Best of luck.